The second video will cover the American tour, the Japanese tour, reaction, and what happened afterwards. Thanks for watching. Okay, Lovesexy goes to America. So it wasn't much of a break after Prince came back from Italy. Oh, sorry, it was actually on the 9th of September, the last show it was. Because 5 days later, Prince opened again, but Prince was very wise. He started in Minneapolis, his home territory. On the 14th of September, he played the first of 2 shows at the Met Center, because obviously, First Avenue was a bit too small. But shockingly, and given this was Minneapolis, where Prince came from, the second show did not even sell out. And what you find all through the American tour, which actually went right through, there were 38 concerts in America, actually more than Europe. Only 600,000 people went to the concerts, and at least 3 concerts were cancelled because of poor ticket sales. But generally, there were some reasons why. First of all, Prince had not toured the USA properly since the Purple Rain tour ended 3.5 years earlier. He had played all these one-off gigs, like, he went to Detroit a couple of times, on his birthday, and he did the Hit and Run tour in '86. He did a few shows here and there. And of course, Prince was showing up at First Avenue and other nightclubs around the Minneapolis area and playing one-off shows. He had just built Paisley Park, so basically the whole show was he could play shows out there now, and he'd been showing up like at a Sheila E. gig, the Lionel Richie concert where she was playing support in 1986. But generally, America had not really seen much of Prince since the Purple Rain days, and his celebrity had been falling, as I mentioned in an earlier video. Whereas Lovesexy was this massive hit around the rest of the world, in America, the album got to number 10, and that single Alphabet Street got to number 8. Now, by September, Glam Stain had come out, it completely flopped in the States, it got nowhere, although it did apparently get somewhere on the black chart. And then he just released I Wish You Heaven, which is a wonderful song, basically one of my favourites. And that song also flopped the charts. So Prince's star had really declined in the States. Probably another reason too was the fact that it was now autumn. And as you know, late September, by the end of November, Prince was getting very, very cold. His last shows were in Dallas, but he played a show in Ann Arbor, and I think it was in far north Michigan in late November, and it was really wet, and then it started snowing, and it was just horrible. And morale actually sank lower. By the end of '88, Prince had also basically fired his managers. He was actually losing money. It was quite serious. And anyway, talking about some of these American shows, they were good. He was still doing the same things. It seemed that a lot of the early reviews, people were getting bored with the preaching part during anesthesia. And there was also a show in, I think in the middle of October, there was a show where someone got run over by a car waiting in line to buy tickets, and that kind of destroyed the morale a bit. Also, too, a show in Cleveland was criticised heavily because people said it was just basically a complete self-indulgent mess. But at the same time, the big areas like LA, New York, Houston, and all sold out basically. And of course Detroit. Detroit was probably the best run of the whole show. He had about 3 concerts and they all sold out, and people loved him. But Detroit had always been Prince territory from very early on, basically. Pretty much since the Dirty Mind tour, where I think Detroit was the only area to sold out. And he also played the Cobo Arena rather than the Joe Louis Arena, which he played on the Purple Rain tour, which was smaller. Probably the worst show was one held in, of all places, Ames, Iowa. And that show, only about half people showed up. Still 10,000, but it was not a good show. So, American tour, miss. European tour a hit, and actually it costed money because, as you've seen, the size of that massive, massive stage set cost a fortune to lump around from town to town. By this stage, there was something like about 50 roadies and technicians on the, how shall I say, the Lovesexy and the Round tour, and as we all know, Prince got bored with a project and the concept really quickly. So, this Lovesexy music has been in Prince's head now for nearly a year. And I think in the end of November 1988, I think the last concert was played on 29th of November in Dallas. Prince was happy to get back to Paisley Park and start on something new. But then a new opportunity came along. And finally, just to mention too, who had been shadowing him the whole time was Michael Jackson on his Bad tour. It was actually possible during the summer of '88 to go to Wembley, go see Michael one night, go see Prince the next night, and I would have loved to have been going to concerts in '88. I could have, but I was 12 years old, I was living in New Zealand. I was a big Michael Jackson fan at the time. I probably wouldn't have even cared about who was Prince. Oh, he's got Alphabet Street, so what? But this would have just been electrifying. So that's the American tour. Okay, Konnichiwa, Japan. The Lovesexy tour goes to Japan. Okay, just finishing up with America. The Lovesexy tour is only seen by about 1/10 as many people that saw Purple Rain. Nearly 6 million went to the Purple Rain shows. There were less also after shows on the American tour, and only a few of the booths survived. But however, the price was kept to the uniform $22.50 per ticket, which was not that much more than the Purple Rain tour, especially since inflation had gone up about 50% since then. Now in Japan, Prince played a total of 8 shows. He played them in 5 cities, and originally he was not going to do the Japanese tour, but apparently there were stories, 2 reasons why he did it. One, he really needed the money because he was nearly bankrupt, and apparently the Japanese tours, he got a very lucrative deal. He made so much money that it actually put him back in the black again. Also, of course, what happened afterwards was also his help on Batman. He'd actually just dropped into London before the Japanese tour, pretty much because they talked about how they want for the new Batman movie, which of course, as we know, turned out to be the biggest thing ever in 1989. They wanted Prince to score the music along with Danny Elfman, and Prince started writing songs because I think they'd heard something like, Dance with the Devil. But anyway, so Prince came in and did that, and then he did the Japanese shows. And the other second reason too was, of course, that the Japanese promoters were going to sue him if he didn't show up, basically. And Prince had only played Japan once before on the Parade tour, and also, Japan had also had its fair share of Michael Jackson concerts, but the Japanese were really good. He basically played 8 shows in 5 major cities. Now, excuse me, I get the names of these wrong. He opened in Sendai, which is in North Honshu, not too far from Fukushima. Then he went to Tokyo, then to Nagoya, then to Fukuoka, which is down in Kyushu, sort of near. So a lot of people in Korea could come across to Fukuoka. And then he finished up in the Osaka-jo Hall in Osaka. And basically, with the Japanese tour was a success. In the 8 concerts, 140,000 people went. Apparently, everyone had a really good time. The Japanese just really lapped up the music. And of course, as we all know, Prince would go back to Japan in 1990 on the new tour, and they hadn't grown tired of him. Like the Europeans, the Japanese were just really getting into it. But Prince didn't want to. He didn't have the energy to do an Australia and New Zealand tour, but of course, we only had 3 more years to wait. Now, also at the end of the show, basically, apparently Prince had begged Kat to stay for the Japanese shows. She did. Nothing really changed much with the Japanese shows from the American and European tours, except for one major thing. He left out God is Alive and Anastasia from the set because, as you know, most Japanese people are Shinto and Buddhist. So he thought that, doing all this preaching about Christian gods might be disrespectful to them. And from what I've heard, it sounds like the Japanese really appreciated it. Now, just another thing too, ticket prices in Japan. Compared to the rest of the tour, Japanese tickets were very expensive, but in 1988, Japan was nearly at the crest of its economic miracle. Tickets ranged anywhere from 5,000 yen to 6,500 yen. Just for comparison, today the yen is around the same as it was in 1988, about 75 to 80 yen to $1. So you're looking at close to $100 for a Prince ticket in Japan, which compared to the USA, $22.50, which would have been about 2,500 yen. So yeah, basically after Prince had finished Japan, it was the 13th of February 1989. By that stage, Prince was probably so entirely sick of the whole Lovesexy music and concept. And that was, so Prince said, arigato Japan. I just have to show this because this is the reason why maybe Prince's Lovesexy tour had a wee bit of a hard time going for it. But just one more thing about Japan. I just realised on Prince a little while ago there was a thread about Prince imitators, and the Japanese must have really gone for Prince. More proof was there's a big J-pop singer. Well, I don't know if he's still performing now because it was 30 years ago, but his name was, again, excuse me if I get this wrong. I've got no problems with Japan. I love Japan. It's a beautiful country. I've been there a couple of times. I think his name was Yasuyuki Okamura. And anyway, Yasuyuki really liked Prince, and there was a piece of a video. He actually had a song in late 1988 called Love and Sex. And it was clearly, looking at it, it showed him humping a brass bed, wearing tight clothes like Prince, and the song was basically about sex. And it was clearly obvious this was a blatant Prince sound-alike. Of course, it was all in Japanese, but I think there were some, like most J-pop, there was some words in English. But so this part here, we're talking about the reaction to the show. First of all, my reaction to the show, there was actually one official video done of it called Lovesexy, which was a Dortmund concert in August of 1988. And it's really good. Some of the scenes are muddy, though. some very muddy parts of that were taken to make a very bad live video of Glam Slam to promote the single, and it's no wonder it was a flop because it had like about 2 minutes of the song cut out. It just basically went from the end of the first verse after Glam Slam, thank you ma'am, you really make me day for you. You know this thing we've got is alive. It's like they've cut out a whole verse, but so that probably didn't help matters, but it was actually more than just a concert. It was more than just a band coming out and just singing all their latest hits. This was an actual act. This was basically about the spiritual rebirth of Prince in this way, the whole new power generation. The show starts off with the lustful old Prince singing all these really sexualized, dirty songs. Like, same with Sign of the Times, he's chasing Cat around the ramp basically, and there's all this, you know, frolicking about on a bed, and I'm sure Yasuyuki Okamoto was watching Lovesexy and taking notes. And basically, then that all ends, and basically the second part is the redemption where Prince discovers God. Like with the epiphany of the album, it's all about Prince having this big epiphany. He comes out and he starts singing about how much he loves God and everything else, and there's nothing wrong with that, but he just loves it. And then he moves into the show ends up, and after all this rediscovering, he's singing all these songs, you know, like I shall be wise, I shall be quick, I shall be strong, no matter no long, all that. Prince, it goes back into a bit of a party again, and of course on the encore, Prince is playing all the big hits like Purple Rain, Kiss, and of course Alphabet Street, which was just bigger than everything at the time. And so basically what happens is this is the big reaction, this is the big finale, bring it all together. I mean, overall, I mean, I can see why some people didn't like it. I mean, we're looking at something that was like well over 2 minutes of music. Like Prince, a lot of people would say it was pretentious because there was all this preaching and other stuff going on in the music. But realistically, I mean, if you were a real fan and you had more than a couple of brain cells, I mean, like me, I mean, my eyes would have just been glued to the stage the whole time. There would have been so much going on. There's 9 people on stage playing the shit out of their instruments. I mean, Prince would have been running around like a ball of energy, basically. I mean, there was about 4 or 5 costume changes in the show. Everybody was wearing like these stretch pants that had their names on them, like saying Minneapolis, Sound, Yes, Cat, Prince, Sheila, you know, Doctor, and all this type of stuff. It would have just been too cool for school, basically. And I honestly think that most people that went to see the Lovesexy tour, especially in Europe and Japan, would have just been blown away. I mean, this guy too, I mean, I would have loved to have gone to a Bad concert, but I mean, basically the Bad tour, okay, it wasn't bloated and rehearsed like the History tour, but basically all it really was just Prince coming out and singing his hits. There was like no real storyline, there was no plot, no one's being shot, no one's being born again, he's not chasing sexy girls around the stage, you know, he's not frolicking about on a bed. Okay, he's singing and he's moonwalking his ass up and down the place, but Prince was also doing all these body popping moves back in the 80s, you know, so the reaction was actually quite a lot of the fans loved it, but a lot of the press, especially in America, was quite scathing, saying it was convoluted. They didn't like Prince preaching at the piano. They didn't like some of the concept. They thought the stage was too large. In some cases, they even criticised ticket prices. Others, they thought Prince's ego was running away from him because he'd cancelled the show because they didn't sell enough tickets or something. And some people even took it out on the weather, especially in Europe. But I mean, these are stupid things. I mean, you can't blame someone because they decide to have some outdoor gigs and then it starts raining. But overall, I mean, this was a great tour. This was great. And that was the Lovesexy tour. Now, just one final bit I'm going to talk about is what happened after the Lovesexy. And I'll give you a clue. Na Batman. You know, basically what happened was in February 1989, Prince had a new manager. He had fired Cavallo, Ruffalo and Fagnoli. Pretty much even though Fagnoli was Prince's minder on the early part of the Lovesexy tour at least. And now he had Albert Magnoli, the man who produced Purple Rain, as his new manager. And anyway, what happened was he was in the studio, he was recording tracks for Batman. Pretty much he scrapped Dance with the Devil, but parts of that became the new song Bat Dance. And pretty much as far as band members go, Cat left, as we know, Bonnie left, and 1989, what you're left with is the horns were jettisoned in the meantime. Eric and Atlanta were jettisoned in the meantime, but they were kind of brought back for the Nude tour, and also for they did their own solo albums in 91. Miko stayed on, the Doctor stayed on incredibly, even though Prince was starting to pick on him a bit by this stage. And of course, as you know, he lasted up to Rock in Rio, when basically he didn't show up and Prince said, "You didn't drop what you were doing for me, so bye." Sheila left, and actually the drum still was empty for a while. There was actually in April 89, Prince went and played jumped on stage with a group called Dr. Mambo's Combo at First Avenue, and he discovered their drummer, a 19-year-old called Michael Bland. And Michael Bland was drafted into drums in 1989. His first real gig was basically being on stage during the famous Electric Chair concert of September 89, where he played it at Live, and that just, man, that song. But And then that was one new band member. Maiko and Prince were fighting, but Maiko stayed right through to the end of the new tour. Levi stayed, and of course Sheila E. had left, Kat had left. So that's who was left basically, and pretty much Prince did no more touring until the new tour in the middle of 1990. So 89-90, also another thing Prince did in 89 was he returned to music and was also decided to rewrite the whole Graffiti Bridge script, and there you are. So basically 1989 left Prince in a better space also too, because as you know when Back Dance came out the song was a #1 hit around the world, even though in my opinion it's a very slight song, you know, and I mean I don't think next year I will be doing a review of the Batman album. I mean it's an alright album, and I know that, you know, Mr. Ants and, you know, Jay and Mr. Purple Music and everyone else under the sun seems to think it's the greatest stuff ever made, but I don't. I mean, my heart is being stuck in Parade to Lovesexy, and that's why I've done this series of videos over the 3 years. And just to let you know, even though I recorded this on the 6th of July, these videos will be released on the 8th of July, and that's important because the 8th of July was, of course, the first 30th anniversary since the first concert in Paris. So there you are, Hundazilla. Keep your hands up in the air, wave them around, Savra Fair, everyone jump up on the one. Yeah, now we're having fun. So there's my Lovesexy series. I'm glad you guys watched it. Hopefully we'll get more than like average of 40 views per video. Yeah, I mean, tell your friends, tell everybody, and if you can, buy Lovesexy, get a copy of Livesexy, you know, try and listen to the music. Again, support official channels, support Prince. You never know, I mean, but even if you only listen to one Prince album, I mean, make sure it's either Parade, Sign of the Times, or Lovesexy, because all of them are just incredible, and thank you so much. And now I leave.